Okay, everybody, we have reached the bottom of the hour, so let's get started with today's L10 webinar, Evolve Your Leadership Training, New Skills for Current and Emerging Leaders, sponsored by CMR Institute. My name is Tim Sosby. I'm Editorial Director for L10. It's my pleasure to welcome you today and serve as a host of our program. I'm going to start with some quick housekeeping items, and I'll turn things over to our speakers. We are planning a 30-minute session for you. Your phones are on mute, but we would love to hear from you throughout today's webinar. You can use the questions feature to ask any questions, make comments, etc., and send them on in. Just type your question, type your comment, hit the submit button, and we'll receive it and we'll get to it throughout today's webinar. We are going to put you to work at least one point in today's webinar and ask some input from you. So it's good to know where that questions feature is, and so you can contribute on request. I also wanted to point out on the control panel, the handouts window, you might wish to download. There's a few items there you may wish to download. You can highlight any or all of these titles and it will walk you through downloading to your desktop. And if you have any troubles with that, you can reach out to me at my email address showing here, and I can gladly connect you with the handouts offline. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand in the L10 Self-Directed Learning Library. I'm going to share an address with you later in today's program for that library, and I'm also going to send you an email about an hour after today's webinar ends with a direct link to the recording. So one way or the other, through that email or through the L10 website, you'll be able to access this recording, and feel free to share with your colleagues. And speaking of sharing, as you leave today, a follow-up survey will appear on a separate browser window. So when you do leave today's program, please look for that survey on a browser window and quickly share your thoughts with us. We appreciate your feedback. And again, along those lines, there's my email address. I'll share that later in today's program as well. If I can help with anything around this webinar or your L10 member experience, certainly don't hesitate to ask. All right, with all that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to our speakers today. Get us started. Let me turn things over to Sharon Lustig. Sharon is Senior Vice President of Client Solutions for CMR Institute. Sharon, thanks for joining us today.
And thank you, Tim. If you advanced a thank you. On behalf of CMR Institute, welcome to the webinar. I'm, as Tim said, Sharon Lustig, and I'd like to thank Terry Herring, Chief Commercial Officer with Synergistix, for taking time to speak with us today. Terry brings a wealth of experience to this topic, and we're really pleased to have him with us today. Welcome, Terry.
Great to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
Well, we are pleased to have you with us today. As a reminder of our learning objectives just for the next 30 minutes, please feel free to type questions and comments into the chat. As Tim mentioned, we'll do our best to share those or answer those within our time together, but if we aren't able to get to all of them, we will follow up with you. As Tim mentioned, we'll be sharing the deck and the recording of the webinar very shortly. So thank you very much. Tim? So as we kind of get started this morning and we head into the topic, let's get some thoughts from our attendees. What do you think is the #1 challenge faced by today's leaders? Will you type those into the chat box for us? And Tim, perhaps you can help me read those out for comment.
I sure will, Sharon. Thank you. Again, folks, you can just type in your question or your comment there in the chat box, hit the submit button, and we'll queue them up for you.
Terry, what do you think is the #1 challenge faced by leaders today?
Well, I think you're asking me, Sharon.
Yeah.
Throwing me off there for a second. Well, while we're waiting, I don't want to influence the audience, but I think that what we've got is a diverse population that we're leading. We have a lot of different ways in which we lead people. There's a lot of dynamics that have changed over the last several years about how we lead and where we lead people. It makes connectivity hard. So to me, I think connecting with our teams is a pretty challenging issue for leaders. How do you connect with them when sometimes they're remote, sometimes they're not? So, we'll speak to connectivity later, but that's a big issue from my perspective. Not the only one, but one that's important.
I agree. Connectedness is super important right now and very challenging given our environment. Any comments to share from Tim?
We've got some great comments. I mean, as a matter of fact, Terry, you were right on point. Todd was typing connecting with employees at the same point you were saying that. So great minds think alike there. We've got a lot of people are saying constant change, dealing with the constant change and the changing needs, being adaptable in organizations that may not be as flexible, engaging employees, having empathy for teams, dealing with the hybrid and remote workforce. understanding team roles, motivating employees, developing relationships, managing virtually, and managing change and keeping people motivated. And Steve asked a question: how do we make our people feel valued and supported in an environment where profitability and efficiency are so pivotal?
Yes,
So good
yes.
stuff.
These are
Yeah,
excellent.
those are
Excellent.
great points. And we're going to hit some of them for sure. And we'd be glad to follow up individually as we go, as even after today. But I jotted down all of those, and I think we're all on the same page.
Right.
It's not easy being a leader now. I would argue it's never been easy, but now we've got all the same problems plus some new problems, new challenges, new opportunities.
New opportunities. That is very true. Very true. So thank you for those comments, and we'll incorporate a number of those into our discussion as we move forward. And as Terry said, we'll follow up. But Terry, you've got a lot of passion for this topic, so why don't you get us started this morning?
So I have a few disclaimers for our friends who've joined us today. One is those that have met me or know me, I am by no means a perfect leader. I have failed as often as I have succeeded. We'll talk about that as we move forward. But there are some topics and some concepts that we think are core, and some things that we think we can challenge ourselves to be better at, especially during challenging time, when you need to be adaptive, when you need to engage people in different workplace settings, and when you've got companies that have different sort of objectives maybe than we would have. I always call it living quarter to quarter versus living in the day to day with the business and the teams. But I also want to point out this, and I think we want to set it up. Today's discussion will be a discussion, some concepts and ideas. I also wanted to mention that we believe that developing your leadership skills and coming and taking the time to do this 30 minutes, we hope you'll find valuable. It's important. Great athletes, great musicians. I'm a Tom Brady fan. Sorry for those that don't like Tom, but they all talk about your mental and physical strength. I actually will talk about this further. I not only have a business coach, but I also have a growth group that I meet with and learn from. And I shout out to CrossFit Suma. I have a coach that helps me there. I know CrossFit, some people like or don't like, but the point is physical and mental health are incredibly important in this environment to leaders. Taking care of yourself is something that I would point out. I have not always done a good job of that, but I would lead off by saying those are core to being a good leader. They help us in dealing with all of these opportunities that we're faced with on how to do it better. But Sharon, let's talk about a few of these things. These words are going to be familiar to all of us. We've all been told, model the way, right? We get promoted to a leader by modeling the way. Inspiring others. The challenge now is how do you inspire people who have different goals? Just the other day, I was at a workshop in Florida, and a very talented individual said, I want to do a great job, but my work is not my life. And I think that that's an important aspect of when you're inspiring someone. How do you do that? And then encouraging them. And then how do we challenge ourselves as leaders to look at things differently? And then how do we turn it over to other people? How do we enable them? We've heard these concepts before, but we have to still do this, right? We still have to enable others. We still have to grow them. We still have to see where they're going. And then the final, this is the old situational leadership, being willing and able. Someone may be willing, but they may not be able. I'll give you a good example. Some people are willing to do the job. They're not able to do it. Some people are willing to come into the office, but don't want to come into the office. What do you do there? But they're very talented. So how do we as leaders keep in mind these are important aspects? There's no one perfect solution, but how do we take a step back as leaders and talk about how we do that? So let's talk about some of those buzzwords. If we go to the next slide, let's talk about some of the things that we are going to talk about today in the core principles that haven't changed. And some of them have changed. They've at least modified. So if you take a look at the next slide, let's talk about some of these things. So here are 3 things that I would ask everybody to at least write down and potentially take away. 1, when you look at core strengths of what you are, that requires self-insight. What are you good at What are you not good at? What do you want to grow? And later, Sharon's going to walk you through some tools that are there available to you. Like I said, I have a business coach. I go to growth groups. I believe in being a mentor. But my core strength is built around self-insight. And that means I have to practice versatility. That means I have to be real. There's several books about honesty and credibility. If I'm not real, they're not gonna follow that, right? Very hard. And by the way, I would suggest many people on this podcast would say, well, what about if your leaders aren't real? I said this, if you feel that, I've said to other people, you cannot, we're gonna get to that in a minute, you cannot accept that as an outcome that dictates how you perform. You've got to challenge yourself to say, that leadership does not inhibit me from being a better leader. That goes to showing willingness, listening, sharing a goal, but maybe you have to have a different approach to that. I'll come to some points around that in a minute. And again, these are just sort of rambling thoughts related to things all of us face. And we'll try to get to some, well, what do you do about it later? The art of communication. Leadership to me is an art, it's not a skill. Some people say I can go to a management class and learn how to manage people. I don't believe that's the case. I also don't believe people are born leaders. I believe they have some skills that connect people better. Some are more outgoing, some are more charismatic. But the art of communication helps you work on versatility and how you can be better. Why is that important? Well, think about the generations of people we're now leading. Think about the diversity of the jobs they're doing. Think about if someone put how that's changed. And think about how you're dealing with an organization that may not have the same core values that you have. Mm-hmm. So what do, Sharon? You practice, practice, practice. CMR is about practicing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You've got some things you have to do. Whether we like it or not, you have to do that. Connecting with others. So self-insight's number one. These things lead to this concept of intentionality. So please write down self-insight. Please write down intentionality. Intentionality is when I'm connecting with, and connectivity will come to second, but intentionality is when I am purposely doing things to make myself better. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I need to hold myself accountable to being better. I need to make sure that when I'm communicating, that I'm clear about what I'm trying to accomplish. Now, again, easy for me to say, I failed many times doing it. But let me give you an example. Years ago, we had a CEO at a company I was with, an incredible speaker, very good speaker. And you would watch his presentations and you would go, wow, that's unbelievable talent. One night when I was running operations, I came across him practicing late at night after everybody else was there. And I'll never forget, he looked at me and said, you don't think that this comes naturally. It is something that I intend to do. It is something that is important to me. So I'd ask all the leaders, have the willingness to have self-insight, have the willingness to be intentional, and finally, connecting with others. How do you connect with others? I call it, I heard it years ago, probably a trite statement, but Velcroing. Knowing what your team and the people that you lead are about. Again, I can't solve the problem that the leaders that you work with, and you may have some incredible leaders. I have worked for some incredible people. I've learned from them. You may also have stumbled in some situations where maybe the leader doesn't model these things. That cannot inhibit you from your own responsibility to practice versatility, flexibility, and understanding. So these are some random thoughts. So self-insight, intentionality, and connectivity. But where does that lead us? So let's see where that leads us, at least from my perspective. Okay, we talked about greater intentionality. What do you need looking for people? What do they need? What do you need? How do you help fulfill that? Encouraging the heart of other people. We've already talked about that. How do you encourage your own heart? How do you find ways to feed your needs? Don't put that, we're going to get to it again, but don't put that onus on somebody else. You need to be responsible for making sure you're taking care of yourself and seeking that. Talk to, not talk with. I feel like the only problem I have with this session is that I'm talking to. I'd rather be sitting somewhere with you, talking with you. about what you're dealing with, this list of questions, but do you take the time to talk to and to listen? I'll give you an example of this. My daughter, who's 24. So I'm living in sort of two worlds. My dad is 83. He was my principal in elementary school. If you want to hear some stories, I'll share them with you about getting in trouble when your dad's the principal. He's 83, he's still on the school board. Still on the school board. Now my daughter's 24. Both of them see the world very differently. But I will tell you this, listening to them, I learned so much. My daughter taught me a lesson the other day about her generation and said, don't make assumptions. She used the Ted Lasso phrase. If any of you are Ted Lasso fans, she used it on me because I always use it. She said, be curious. As leaders, I think we should not be judgmental, just like Lasso says, but we should be curious. I want to understand what an 83-year-old school board member thinks about life. I also want to listen to my daughter, who both say, don't make assumptions about who we are, get to know us, and connect with us. And finally, before I hand it over to Sharon with a couple thoughts, the onus is on us. I believe that I must keep learning new skills. I believe I must keep growing as a leader. I believe that I can fail forward, which is a technology term. I can fail forward, but I can't keep failing forward. I can fail forward and come back and say, okay, what did I learn from that? What did I learn from that situation? So when I look at the list of things that came forward about what's the most challenging right now, yes, connecting with people. But I got to challenge myself to learn new skills to do that. I've got to try to grow as a leader, to engage in this environment, to connect in this environment, to look at a workforce that's more diverse than it's ever been as a leader. And I've got to manage in a corporate world that is constantly changing and challenging. So I can only give you those words of advice and tell you that I have failed forward more times than I would like. But I do know this. Sharon's got some ideas on how CMR can help you. And then at the end, we're going to talk about the fact that we will encourage you to seek mentorship, to seek to learn and grow. CMR and L10 are there for you as well. Sharon, I've rambled on long enough. Help us land the plane here a little bit.
Well, thank you, Terry. I don't think you were rambling at all, of course. But given the importance of what we've heard Terry say about enabling success moving forward, I really do think it lays the foundation for the understanding that there are things that we need to incorporate in our traditional learning leadership programs moving forward so that we can connect with, as you said, our changing workforce. The market landscape is constantly changing and is requiring new competencies and skills to, as our participants mentioned, to motivate, to engage, to balance that drive for performance and empathy, and how do you bring those things together? And I'll just say, echoing again what you said, practice, 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 as none of us ever get the opportunity to stop learning when we're developing the next group of leaders that are coming along. So thank you for all of that, Terry. So what I'll share with you kind of depicts an approach to a long-term training program, not necessarily a workshop or a multi-day event that we can support those. This example learning journey is really customized to meet the specific client and learner needs for a specific group. And obviously, as Terry mentioned, we can't share every scenario that fits every role or need on the leadership journey, if you will. But we do want to share how we incorporate a lot of what Terry's discussed to support the development of existing and next in line leaders. So for many of our programs we develop for leadership development, these are some of the core topic areas. Leading teams, really driving performance, leading change, those types of things. Terry, I'll ask you here, you talked to core principles. Do you see any other core topics in general that should be pulled through in traditional training programs?
I am a big fan of the coaching and mentoring process.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that in mentoring, you learn both ways.
Mm-hmm.
I have several people that I coach that I have met that through a youth business process,
Mm-hmm.
and I always go to them and I say, you should now become a mentor yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So skills around mentoring and coaching to me are very important.
Right, right, right. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And Tim, if you don't mind changing the slide, that'd be great. So added to, as Terry and I have spoken to, kind of traditional learning topics, now there's really an emphasis on ensuring that all of these may be performed with empathy, showing vulnerability, increasing trust, and being aware of your own biases, and then being able to help others recognize and manage their biases. As Terry has mentioned, driving that collaboration and connectedness and performance across what we have as multi-generational and multicultural teams. So these power skills like empathy, building trust, those are really evolving and taking on more importance and are very reflective of the leadership competencies that Terry kind of talked about at the top of the webinar. So as you think about the comments that we received at the top of the webinar from the attendees around motivation, about engagement, Terry, I really feel like putting these things in place help us in that journey toward more engagement, more connectedness, being able to understand where people are coming from so you can coach them and mentor them toward better performance, not only for themselves, but also for the company.
No, I think that's exactly right. So let me give you sort of an example of that.
Okay.
So for years now, there was a book called Credibility that came out years ago about by Kuzin Posner, and it basically said honesty is the number one thing people seek in leadership.
Right.
If you look at studies today, that's still important. People just want you to be honest with them. They don't want any of this, silliness or what's going on. There's like honesty. And that comes to building trust. And that means not assuming things about people, but understanding them, we talked about before. I'll give you an example just in the last couple of weeks. I was on a Zoom call and we were making a presentation to a client. And in that session, in that setting, I made what historically I thought would have been an okay coaching. If I'd been sitting in the room with someone, it would have been an okay coaching moment. But because of the setting, it wasn't taken that way by the person I was coaching. I called afterwards and said, hey, I'm sorry. Leadership requires to build trust. You have to say, I messed up. I thought I was doing something good, but I think it's important for leadership to build trust and honesty by saying, this is as honest and as truthful as I can be. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes.
Right, right. I applaud you in that. It's always an area I feel like I need to improve in. Given that we are pushing the half hour that we had, I'll just move on to the next slide without wanting to engage much more on that topic, Terry. The cadence for a program that CMAR would put in place might look something like this if it's reasonably paced throughout like a 12-month program. As I mentioned, in this example, we'll look at more of a long-term program. So these are micro-learning topics and are designed for asynchronous interactivity. They are very life sciences based in their examples, in their exercises, in their scenarios, and in general have about a 20 to 30 minute seat time. Most of our programs ask participants for about an hour to a month to complete their work and reflect upon it through the tools we provide. Note that the power skills like empathy are inserted in a logical way throughout the program and integrated with more of the traditional knowledge and skill building content. As topics and needs emerge, CMR Institute creates off-the-shelf and custom resources to supplement the asynchronous learning and to ensure the competency alignment. The pace, the time commitment, the emphasis topics are really all different by company and perhaps by role, of course. And we use pre, during, and post assessments to really help us to determine the best approach and to give us information along the way if we need to reinforce certain areas or alter the program for best results. And of course, with almost all learning programs, the way a program makes room for reinforcement and idea sharing through peer learning and practice really supports the difference between great learning and behavior change. Tim, if you'd change the slide. So as we think about that, as we think about the opportunity for reinforcement and practice, in this example, this is an emerging leader program structure. There are really 4 structural aspects to engagement, reinforcement, and practice. Microlearning, which is reinforced with other blended learning materials to pull it through, give practice, reflection opportunities. The learners are provided with guides that keep them on track and keep them engaged. They really offer those reflection opportunities and exercises that reinforce the integration between knowledge and skill building. CMR Institute also really encourages the concept of peer learning and practice, which maybe includes the creation of virtual cohort groups that really meet monthly or quarterly to provide opportunities for that real world experience, practice, and idea sharing. We also encourage that each person along the way within the cohort be given an opportunity to lead 1 or 2 of these sessions during the program to give them the opportunity to lead from there. We provide them with detailed facilitation guides, content summaries, pull-through questions, scenarios, so the collaboration and idea sharing is deeper and really get to the heart of the matter. And of course, throughout this period, we believe the learners, managers, and leaders should be aware of the program and really help pull through all of that. And as I said, this is just one example, but leadership feedback, retention figures, promotional statistics really show that these are effective opportunities for growth, especially with these more human or power skill emphasis areas, giving participants room to practice, and that's really important. Tim? As Terry shared with us, one of the most important areas that we try to facilitate through the structure of these programs is giving people room to fail. Failing is important in the leadership journey, not only along the learning way, but it really never ends, in my opinion. Leadership programs really benefit from the opportunity to fail safely, so that practice environment is what we really need to bring about. And we spoke a bit to these aspects just a second ago, but practicing those skills, dealing with unique situations before they need to be put into action is where the practice and the failing safely, because we'll never stop making mistakes here and there, as Terry mentioned, but giving them the opportunity to fail safely is really important. And these are the types of pull-through things that we can offer to help really customize the programs to make them very specific to the need, specific to the organization. So Terry, with your commitment to lifelong learning, what other additional suggestions would you have for pull-through?
I would just simply add that seeking to be intentional in your efforts. The only advice I could give the group here is try to train those leadership muscles in these areas. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So as we come to the end of our time together, just by a couple of minutes, we've offered some best practices along the way through our chat today. We've listed some here on the screen about integration of power and human skills and how important we really believe that to be. If you have others, we'd love for you to type those into the chat, whether you're a developer of trainer or leading training, or you are a leader yourself, or all 3 of those things. I think we would all benefit from understanding each other's best practices. We'll put all of that together with our follow-up and share that with the registrants after the webinar. So Terry, any closing thoughts today?
No, I am sure that we have left everybody wanting as to what is the exact answer. We wish we had that secret sauce, but what we do are encouraging is seek that, make that your goal, to seek and learn and grow. No matter how accomplished you are as a leader, no matter your tenure or your role. We believe at CMR, and I believe personally, that you got to seek and want to grow and be better. That's the only advice I could give somebody, and it's not, very overwhelming.
I think it's very impactful, Terry, because you have brought some great ideas to this discussion and really, really appreciate it. So on behalf of CMR Institute, thank you, Terry, for joining us and for sharing your expertise. And thank all of you for joining us today. Back over to you, Tim. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Terry. Great presentation. I know we're at the top of the hour. I'm going to ask one quick question. Mark asked us, are the
Sure.
cohort groups we talked about, are they open enrollment? Do the people learn from other people, from those in other organizations, or are they specific within one organization?
Typically we run them specifically within an organization. So currently those cohorts are encapsulated within an organization. They may be multifunctional, spread across many different areas, but they are to a certain client organization.
Excellent, thank you. Folks, we are out of time, and in fact, we're a little bit over time. I don't want to take everybody's schedule up, but I wanted to make sure I point out that Terry and Sharon were kind enough to share contact information here for you as well. We have received any questions, we'll save them. We can try to get answers for you offline. If you're still typing, please keep typing. I'll be here for another few minutes and we can get answers for you offline, but you're also welcome to connect with Terry and Sharon as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Terry and Sharon, again, thank you both for being here today. Great presentations.
Take good care, everybody, and good luck.
Folks, as we're leaving today, I'm just going to share some L10 information with you as well. Just wanted to show you the current L10 events calendar. This does change quite a bit, so always keep an eye on the L10 website and bookmark it. It's the first place that new programs are listed, of course. One of the programs listed here is this one, our June 12th to 15th annual conference, L10 2023, 52nd annual conference. You can find out more information, view the keynote, view the speakers, meet the speakers, view the agenda, and register, of course, at l10conference.com. And finally, I'll invite you to join us for our next webinar. We'll be back here on Friday for why team-to-team customer engagement will change everything. And we also have programs coming up next week on ChatGPT and tips for creating fair, valid, and effective assessments. You can find out more information on these and other webinars and register at l-10.org/webinars. Here's the address for the Self-Directed Learning Library where today's recording will be housed within the hour. I'm also going to send you an email about an hour from now with a direct link to that recording. And finally, there's my email address. If I can help with anything, certainly don't hesitate to reach out. So just as we're wrapping up, I'm seeing some thank you messages come in. Let me reiterate that for our speakers. Thank you again to Sharon and Terry. Thank you also to CMR for sponsoring today's webinar. And thanks to everybody in the audience for your time, attention, and participation. Let me wish you a good rest of your day and a good rest of your week, and we will talk to you all soon. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.